Morning.
Morning.
Brought the whole team with me today. Everybody all set? Well, good morning, and thanks for being here today. This week, we kicked off a couple of holiday celebrations at the State House with the annual Christmas tree lighting. We'll follow that up with the menorah lighting next week. It's hard to believe it was only 3 years ago, during the height of the pandemic, that people weren't able to gather. Many businesses were closed, and things didn't feel all that bright and festive. We knew how hard this was going to be on families in particular. So, to create a sense of hope and keep people connected, we launched Vermont Lights the Way and asked everyone to light up Vermont any way they could for the holiday season. At the same time, we wanted to show Vermonters could also light the way with acts of kindness. So we also started Rays of Kindness, which recognizes people for spreading goodwill during an incredibly difficult time. The purpose was to shine some light during those dark times. And we weren't sure what to expect, but we got such a strong response. It was clear that this is something people needed more of, whether in a global pandemic or not, so we've done it every year since. And Vermont really does light the way in many different respects, and we've proven it time and time again. Whether it was through the pandemic, this summer's flooding, or global and national turmoil, Vermonters continue to show their commitment to community, willingness to serve, and going the extra mile to help those in need. We see this in all kinds of acts, big and small. Sometimes it's just the little things, those simple, random, everyday acts of kindness that can make all the difference in the world. And I believe it's important to highlight those deeds and the good people who make them happen. Over the last year, for example, a Colchester woman was recognized for lending a shoulder to cry on for a neighbor whose mom was just diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and then visited her mom in the memory care center while her family was out of town. An 8th grader in Swanton helped families in need by providing care packages for their pets to lessen the burden on them. And residents in Brattleboro organized a community toy drive. When it comes to the flood, there have been so many that have come our way. From EMS workers knocking on doors of those who needed heat, to state park employees evacuating and hosting campers in flooded campgrounds, to communities who donated everything from air mattresses to food for their neighbors. The point is, there's no act too big or too small to put forward as a nomination. And I know there are countless stories we haven't heard and that should be recognized. And we want to do that because kindness is contagious. There's a chain reaction with good deeds, and we certainly need more good these days. I've signed a proclamation making December Rays of Kindness Month, and we'll be celebrating these acts. So I'm asking Vermonters, if you have someone in mind, go to our website, governor.vermont.gov/kindness, to nominate them. And while we're talking about goodwill and helping others, please remember to buy Vermont Strong plates at dmv.vermont.gov/vermontstrong23 to help the thousands of Vermonters still struggling from the flood. As a reminder, for the month of December, half the funds will go to help businesses who need a little help to get their doors open and keep them open. And the other half will go to Vermont Community Foundation for individual needs, specifically housing, critical financial expenses, food, and mental health. We need everyone to step up. It's not enough to pull out your plate from Irene. We need those who are struggling to know we have their back and haven't forgotten them. So with that, I'll open up to questions.
Sorry to cut off the
good vibes.
The good news.
Here I am.
Can always count on you.
Here I am. We are rapidly hurtling toward legislative session. What are maybe top 3 priorities for you heading into this year?
Well, I would say, I mean, certainly top on the list for me is something that's been top of our list the last 6, 7, maybe even 8 years, housing. That's certainly going to be front and center, and I think it's something that we share with the legislature. The flood recovery continues to be something we have to address and continue to do. And our flood recovery office will continue to make sure that we channel as much funding as we receive from the federal government to do so. And then the budget, which is going to be difficult this year. It's going to be a challenging year, but I do think if we all come together with, recognizing that we have some of the same goals, that we can get through that and make it happen and protect Vermonters while making sure that we're not forcing people to make decisions about where they live. So we want people to stay in Vermont. We want to attract more people to Vermont, and we certainly need them to fulfill our workforce, but we need all the ingredients to do that.
When you say it's going to be a tough budget year, I know that raising taxes is pretty much a non-starter for you, and so are you thinking that there are going to be areas in state government that are going to have to face cuts?
Well, we'll see. I mean, obviously the legislature has all the power now. They have the supermajority, and I'll make my best case for why we shouldn't be raising taxes, why we can't. They certainly did a lot of that last year. It took a lot of the taxing capacity away, and it doesn't leave much room at this point. And I think that there'll be many legislators on both sides of the aisle that will agree with that. So we're going to have to look for ways to move through. I've always personally, and in my business, and in the political process and budgetary process, I think about things in terms of want and need, and the need comes first, and it's difficult to distinguish between the two, but that's where I start.
Governor, going off of that, last week's education tax rate letter forecasted a pretty high property tax rate increase. So what do you say to the burden that could put on Vermonters? Yeah,
that's something that I don't think Vermonters can endure. And we have to find ways to make sure that we're keeping the property tax. We already have one of the highest property tax rates in the and attracting more people to our state or keeping people here. So we'll have to work together and find ways to alleviate that. And I think, you have to be honest with ourselves, and every option, all ideas should be on the table without discounting anything. It just should be on the table and take the politics out of it. And let's see what's best for the kids first. Make sure we're protecting them. And I would say that because we spend a lot of money on education in Vermont, but we have to recognize we may not be getting our money's worth in terms of the outcome. So we're going to have to look at that and address that, and but keep in mind the goal of making sure we educate our kids.
A big part of that forecasted increase was because of COVID cash that districts were using, supposed to be for one-time funds, but now they've accrued those, or they've built those numbers into their budget. Now they can't support them. I mean, you and other lawmakers all along had called for use this one-time money for one-time expenses. I mean, did the message not get through? What
Apparently
what are you
not.
reading?
As you recognize, I said this a lot over the last couple of years. We need to, all this money is one time, and we have to treat it as one time, meaning that we need to invest it in ways that would give us the highest return. And using it to just take care of expenses, just spending it, will just lead us to where we're at today. So I think, again, we're here. This is where we're at. There are local budgets that that have a lot to do with where we're at. So we'll just have to address it and work together to work our way out of it.
Yes, some of the educators would say, let's look at the factors behind these increases. Healthcare costs,
Sure.
premiums skyrocketing, also
Inflation.
So, I mean, even though it's a huge increase, I think they probably feel like they're treading water.
Yeah, well, 20% increase, if that comes to be, is just not something that's palatable. We just can't afford it without finding other ways to supplement that. What do we want to do without? And maybe those are discussions we have to have. But we have to live within our means because we're already spending a lot of money.
How effective has Act 46 been in your mind? I mean, part of this as well is, funding rural school districts as well, which cost more, of course, to educate rural students. How effective do you think it's been since it passed 5, 6, I forget how long ago, but.
Well, I would leave it to the experts to decide whether it's been effective or not. Again, I look at where we're at today, and some of the same challenges are there, and some of them are out of, what we need more people in the state. We need more taxpayers, not more taxes. We need more kids to fill those schools, and that's where we're people to live here and come here is not the solution.
Governor, a bit of a shift away from that, but
Thank
today,
you.
Vermont's Criminal Justice Council is expected to make a decision regarding Sheriff John Grismore being able to continue practicing law enforcement in the state. Do you have any desired outcome from this? I mean, you've said before that you wished he didn't run for the position after the incident at this point.
Yeah, I mean, that's a decision they're going to have to make. And I made my point early on. I didn't think he should run, but he did run, and the people of the county elected him. So they knew with their eyes wide open what they were getting. So now it's up to the Criminal Justice Board to determine whether he should continue to be certified in law enforcement. But that doesn't preclude him from being sheriff.
And on another side as well, Montpelier's post office still remains closed. I mean, repairs have been going on there, in the State House, different buildings across the city. Do you have any stance on potentially getting that post office back or a timeline for those offices?
Yeah, we have nothing to do with that. It's a federal issue. And I don't know how much, to be honest with you, and this is probably a better question for the federal delegation, but I don't know how much work they're doing to the building at this point. I don't know what their long-range plan is. We reached out to them and offered to help in any way we could with some of the buildings we have to supplement or both either short-term, long-term needs. And they weren't interested in some of our solutions, but maybe they will be. We're still open to having conversations about what that could be.
What does it tell you about your communication, or even the congressional delegation's communication with the Postal Service? I mean, they haven't even, the Postal Service hasn't responded to the delegation's letter of a month ago.
Yeah. I don't know. They seem to be autonomous to everyone else, and they don't seem to have to answer to anybody at this point. I don't know. I mean, it's a good question. Again, another good question for the federal delegation, I believe, how they feel about it.
Do you get the impression that they don't care?
I don't know what to make of it, to be honest with you. I mean, this isn't some small town that just lost a few post office boxes. This is our capital city. I mean, they should be paying attention to this, I believe. But they don't appear to be.
Speaking of,
Question about the pavilion, when do you expect to go back?
I'd say in January, first part of January.
And how has this been as a workspace for you guys?
It's been great. Yeah. No, we're very fortunate to have it. It's our continuation of operations plan. that we put forth. It was Suzanne Young that forced us to do it as Secretary of Administration, and it was flawless in some respects. So this has been great space for us.
Seems to be better than the pavilion in a sense, which
You know,
is
there's a
long
lot
and narrow.
of
This
there's a lot
is
of attributes
big
to
and
this.
wide.
Yeah, no, I enjoy actually being here. So
Can you walk to work?
I could.
How much less, in a way, is the cash flow now that all the COVID has gone away?
Well, now we have, another round. All the COVID money is gone, but then now we have more cash coming in because of the IRA and the BIL and all the other federal programs that have come into be more infrastructure-wise. But that'll be circulating within the coffers, and that's one of the bright spots for us as well. That with the legislature, we did come to agreement on having match money for those federal dollars, and that's going to benefit us tremendously in the future as we try and ride this storm out over the next few years.
Has there been any received drop now that Leahy's not there?
Too early to tell, but I'm sure there will be, yes.
I have a question about state's high-tech operation. Every now and then, I keep reading articles that it's way behind.
That Vermont is?
Yes, in tech. And last week there was an article about mental health for youth, and the database was not working properly and that kind of stuff.
Well,
This seems to be an ongoing
yeah.
problem for 10 or 15 years.
Yeah, well, I would say either DMV, Department of Labor, all those legacy projects, the big ones, have been on the radar for decades, and now we're just getting to them. So, again, the good news is we are in the initial phases of that, DMV and Labor. So that's good. When I came into office, we recognized the need for having an agency, a new agency that the legislature went along with us on to create the Agency of Digital Services, which has been tremendously helpful in making sure that we have our thumb on those technical digital needs. So it's been very effective and one of the highlights of this administration.
And you are the largest business in the state, aren't you?
Possibly, sure, probably.
Employees and revenue and all that?
Well, yeah, it's hard to look at it in terms of revenue, but I don't think of ourselves as a business, but we do employ a lot of people. We should run it more like a business, maybe.
I was wondering how you sort of view the Republican presidential race at this point, understanding how you feel about Donald Trump. Would it be helpful to winnow this field down so there's one strong challenger to Trump?
I think there will be eventually. Maybe your point is maybe not soon enough, but I think they're getting there. It seems as though it's coming down to. It seems to me as though it would come down to maybe DeSantis and Haley and Christie. Maybe Christie would be on the outside.
I mean, you've talked before about how important you feel it is that a governor be president,
Right.
With that experience. So you've got Haley, DeSantis, and Christie. Who do you like there? Who's your favorite there?
Well, I like Chris Christie for a lot of reasons, but I like Nikki Haley as well. I know both of them, and when I first became governor, both counseled with me, so I know them better than the others.
What do you like about her?
I think her approach, she's got a lot of compassion, but she's run a state, so she understands, how to balance a budget and how to make sure that economic development is on the forefront. But I can say that about Chris Christie as well. They're both the same.
Do you look at her as a more realistic candidate in winning?
It's hard to say, but I think she has a lot of attributes, and she certainly was on the worldwide stage as well as the ambassador to the United Nations. I think that's helpful. especially in these days.
Have any of them asked for your endorsement?
No, I don't think they want to hurt their chances.
Governor, your DCF commissioner sent a letter to lawmakers asking them to once again, not just pause, but indefinitely pause the Raise the Age initiative. What's your assessment of how those reforms are going and why pause?
Well, we've had concerns about the raise the age from the very beginning. So we decided to move forward with that. But again, we've asked for delays all on the way, and I think it's appropriate not to move forward with that. I think it'd be more helpful. I think we have to rethink some of what we've done over the last 2 or 3 years, and maybe bring back the pendulum towards the center. Public safety is a big concern of mine and many others across Vermont.
For you, what's giving you pause? What's changed?
Oh, just the amount of criminal activity we're seeing across the state, across the country, but across the state in particular. We thought we were somehow insulated from all of that, but a lot of it is due to drug trafficking, and that seems to be I would say, the core of our issue.
We could go to the phones. We have Ed Barber, Newport Daily Express.
Can you hear me?
We can.
All right. Governor, to go back to your favorite topic, is housing. When the pandemic started, the moratorium placed on evictions. And when I looked at the start, do you, what the backlog eviction is on our books and how compared to the historic average?
I only got about half of every word you said, Ed, so I hate to ask you this, but can you try it again? Unless somebody else caught it in here.
Yeah, so I'm putting some back feedback. I'm asking about the moratorium on eviction, which it was lifted. In the meantime, there was a backlog that gets built up, and I'm asking the status of those backlog cases are, and how they compare to the historic average.
I think you were asking about the moratorium on evictions, and I'm not
Yeah.
sure of the status of that at this point, Ed, and how long that will be in place. But I'll get you the answer and get back to you.
Okay. The second question related, when the pandemic started, Congress allocated roughly $50 billion for housing. The Vermont share went to Vermont State Housing Authority, in which the landlord collects the information to be able to qualify a tenant to get a rent subsidy. A year later, Congress appropriated this amount, but they went through a federal program where the tenant had to do the paperwork. There's a lot of landlords that didn't get paid because the tenant wouldn't operate. And I'd like to know how those landlords can get their back rent, because some of them that I'm familiar with are not renting their apartments that should be available to the public.
Yeah, I don't know as I got the full breadth of your question, Ed, unfortunately, but had to do with evictions again. You're going back to the pandemic. I believe that's all been lifted with the state of emergency. That is no longer in place. But in terms of if there are units that are not being utilized at this point, due to some legal procedure, we definitely would be all ears, because we have a shortage of housing, as you know, and we want to make sure that we're filling all those units. We need more online. We have the VHIP program that was something that I had thought about early in when I became governor, because I looked at all the homes in Barry, for instance, all the beautiful Victorian homes, and thought we should be utilizing them and maybe putting accessory dwellings on them, turning some into apartments and so forth. And we the state should be putting that forward. Unfortunately, the legislature didn't go along with that when I first proposed it, but now it's working. It's working well. They did adopt it, and it's putting units back online for a fraction of the cost of new ones. So if you have apartment house owners that need some help in putting those back online, please let us know. And because we want, the VHIP program sounds like it would be most useful to them and to us. But I can, if you can, Ed, if you can send us an email with your questions specifically, so that we get exactly what you want from that.
Perfect. That would be excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
I assume that it's Jason.
Yeah. Rebecca will reach out to you.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Tim McQuiston, Vermont Business Magazine.
Hi, Governor. Beth Bishop, the president of Vermont Chamber, announced that she is stepping down next year after serving for many years. I was wondering if you had a comment about that.
You know, I that was news to me as well. I hadn't heard anything about that before I read it yesterday. Unfortunate for the chamber. She's been great, a great addition to the economic future of Vermont. She has all the creds that she worked with the administration during the Douglas administration. She was deputy chief of staff, I believe, at that point. She was Department of Labor. So she understands government. I don't know what's next for her. Maybe you could tell me, but I don't know. I haven't spoken to her, but I owe her a call.
Well, it does beg the question, Governor, because many people have suggested she should run for the job you currently have, and you two are friends, I think it's fair to say. So, you know, being a reporter, we try and connect the dots. Have you made a decision on whether you're going to seek re-election?
I have not.
Okay, that's a pretty brief answer there. Trying to connect the dots here with Betsy Bishop and you, but all right, thank you, Governor, I appreciate it.
Back to the room.
Will you tell us when you do decide?
I will.
Okay, thank you.
You mentioned flood recovery as one of the priorities for this. Anticipating perhaps a PAC money fill in gaps for communities, residents?
We're still hoping. We don't. I still don't know as we understand how much money is available through the federal government at this point in time. So we're hopeful that there'll be one-time money for mitigation and recovery. So we're still, Doug Farnham's, of course, our chief recovery officer, and he's looking for every pot of money he can possibly find to help in that regard. So, and you know, bigger projects like the corridor from Barry to Waterbury is something that I'm interested in. I think that could alleviate a lot of problems for Barry, Montpelier, and Waterbury in the future if we could expand the river corridor, provide capacity for storage of stormwater.
Are you thinking of enlarging the river at that point?
Well, it would be widening it, yes, and providing relief there so that we can store the high intensity rainstorm that comes and provide for a place for it to go. You think about, I mean, we're still making decisions about central garage, for instance, whether we're going to rebuild there or we're going to vacate, and maybe we would turn, if we vacate, maybe we would turn that into some storage capacity there. There are a number of areas along the river that I believe could be utilized, and use them for that storage bin, so to speak.
I mean, there's a proposal or an idea of maybe taking the state parking lots in downtown Montpelier and making those all green space.
That could work, but if they're low and they're parking, we just need the storage capacity. So it doesn't, again, I'm no expert, but we just need places for the water to naturally go and overflow the banks. And if they go on to a parking lot where you can move cars out of the way and not impact homes and businesses, that's great. You know, and then we can clean them up after.
You mentioned not knowing at this point how much more money we're going to be able to get from the feds. What has communication been like with FEMA and the White House?
We've had a good rapport with FEMA. The White House has been responsive, and the congressional delegation has been there with us along the way, and we're hoping that there'll be some supplemental funding for some of those bigger projects like the Berry project that I talked about before. And there is some money that is there that was appropriated in the supplemental bill quite a few months ago for FEMA, and whether any of that money could be utilized for some of the mitigation work we want is just an unknown at this point, but the delegation is working on that.
Yeah, because that was for the disaster relief fund, and at least my understanding is that that's more for acute needs, not as much these long-term mitigation projects. Were you hoping for leeway in that?
Well, there's always those notwithstanding clauses that could be utilized.
With all of the flood recovery work that the state needs to budget for this year, I'm wondering if there are other policy priorities that you think are going to need to take a backseat. I'm thinking specifically of the legislature's appetite for a paid leave bill.
Well, we have the paid leave provision, the volunteer paid family leave that we put into place is working very, very well. And it's an avenue that they should consider. I don't believe there's the taxing capacity that they see for that. I mean, there is always taxing capacity, but how much damage you do along the way is of concern of mine. So I think that that's one area that they should think about. I've already said that what we have is going to work, and it seems to be working for a lot of employers.
How is it working? Like, can you kind of lay out? Because it's been, what, like a year since that?
Yeah, I don't have all the facts and figures here, but I can get that for you, or we can talk about it. That'd be a good subject in another press conference, actually, to tell you where we're at with that.
Okay, gave you a topic.
Thank you.
Governor, the sheriffs had said that the last year's law was kind of a power grab by the legislature. And are you concerned that an appointed criminal justice board decertifying an elected official is maybe an administrative infringement on local elected rights?
Yeah, it's right along the edge, because they're not really barring him from being a sheriff. They're debarring that person from law enforcement ability, right? You don't have to be, I don't believe, maybe I should check with our general counsel first, but I don't believe you have to have a law enforcement certification to be sheriff.
Sort of like sitting in the legislature without actually getting to vote. I mean, maybe that's not a great analogy, but to have a sheriff who can't enforce the law himself as a police officer seems
Well,
kind of
although, I
compromising.
mean, they're like an administrator, and they're there. I agree. I mean, it'd be preferable if they had their certification, but I'm not sure that That's where I'm not sure that it really is like unconstitutional, because they're not throwing him out of office. That would be something the legislature would have to do.
Okay.
Great. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.